let me continue this article. So, what's going to happen here? It says in this article, it appears that for mankind on this planet, the photon belt encounter will be essentially a spiritual experience. But it really depends on man. If you have a high positive energy, it's going to be good for you. If you have very low spiritual vibrations, you're very selfish, you might have a problem with the photon belt. It says, the stellar activations have already begun and will continue. Well, in this article it says from 2012 to 2017, but I think that time is off just a little bit because I think we're just on the verge of it right now. We're just entering it. And it says here, the stellar activation occurs when of the Pleiades, which the star Alcyone, Sirius is involved, Arcturus is involved, Orion, of course, is right next to the Pleiades, not too far away, and Andromeda. The frequency bands then merge and pass through Earth. And if Earth is out of balance within itself due to abuse from invader ETs, i.e. the Illuminati and Earthman's behavior, the higher frequencies in this article, according to this, will cause an Armageddon. Now, that's just one person's opinion. To understand the alignment, one could think of circles within circles, or cycles within cycles, turning at different rates to which are attached magnets. Clearly, periodically, they could line up, forming one long and powerful magnet. This would act like a powerful current. It is called the holographic beam, since it contains the fundamental energy of these systems. And when I talk about holograms in the part 2 of today's talk, I'll go into some of this stuff, the holographic universe that we're living in. Excuse me. It says, after the convergence, this holographic beam carries the remains of photon activity. And when the Earth is in alignment, it merges with higher dimensional parallel Earth, Terra. And that's one I'm not really familiar with, but you guys probably know about Terra. During this process, the particles and antiparticles of these planets and their anti-parallel planets are unified in certain specific ways. When these particles and antiparticles come together, they create intense photonic activity, which we know as the photon belt. It is continually renewed each cycle as the holographic beam passes out through Alcyone, leaving the band around the star. As implied, there will be a natural spiritual selection. In the initial stages of photon belt encounter, only the sensitive will detect anything strange, but when we fully enter, even the most hardened individuals will receive the full effects. Both great illumination of consciousness will occur and great resistance to new ideas. This is a period of awakening, essentially due to the ascension cycle and planetary alignment. What proportion of effects are directly due to the belt is difficult to say. Nevertheless, this phenomenon of both the photon belt plus stellar activity will reduce the veil, stopping us from seeing who we are. It will remove some of the barriers around the cells and the DNA, making them more reactive and responsive to new energies. And in fact, the DNA will attempt to respond to the changing frequencies, increasing its capacity. Now, I've heard people say, this is not in the article, but I've heard people say that when we go into the photon belt, our DNA will be changed from 2 strands to 12 strands. And that's a fantastic change. Anyway, he goes on to say that psychological characteristics of entering the belt are the effect of uprooting hidden, secret, or withheld material, bringing it to the surface for transmutation. This means psychological and physical disease patterns will be forced to the surface, that is, the conscious mind. This will give tremendous opportunity to make advancements, but also where there is too much to handle, it will cause illness, depression, disease, and death. More advanced viewpoints see the photon band as being a consciousness, which essentially has a personality for change and action. It presents opportunities for change on a planet by adding new energies. It increases the flow of energy of the magnetic grids of Earth, attracting new ideas and energies. People will feel the need to transform, but those who consider this physical reality their only expression will dwindle into greater fixations, blocks, and negativity. So it even says, nevertheless, it aids eradication of a species' self-destructive tendencies, which might mean wiping out the civilization. It says even the most dense person will be accelerated into a higher state of consciousness, causing possible havoc in their mind and body if they are not prepared. And it goes on to say that it talks about channeled information, which I won't really go into. Other information from the source has been given about the effect on animals. They will forage more widely and attempt to give birth more often to maximize their species. They will be drawn to build up areas. In some cases, this will be old territory for them, but they will feel the need to be closer to humans, and even for the wild animals. And it says the effects on the Earth's body are expected to be quite dramatic. The photon belt enables the planet to repair herself. She will, for example, protect her oil. Too much is being drawn off by man and cannot all be replaced. Not dissimilar to drawing off a man's cerebral spinal fluid. Mother Earth will harden the crust under the surface and pull in oil, gases, coal, and ores deeper into the center, shifting harmlessly also benevolent races into protected regions. The photon belt will not apparently leave until humans utilize surface resources only, including water. It says, excuse me. So, scientists will find that subatomic particles will become more evident and easier to detect. Electricity will be reduced and become less available in the next 50 years. This represents an energy depletion of the planet. Earth is taking on a new energy, and scientists must find new ways of working with it. So, scientists will be paying more attention to how love affects life and its chemistry. New diseases will arise and abnormal heart rhythms for the descending group, but expansion of the heart for the ascending group. And there's going to be a number of other spectacular effects that this article goes on to talk about. But anyway, that's the gist of what I wanted to talk about on the photon belt. Just kind of like an introduction to the photon belt, what it's about, and for anybody that's never heard of the photon belt. So if anybody would like to share any ideas that they have about the photon belt, please speak up and add what you can.
Well, just, I'm a naturalist, so I'm just looking at it from the Native American viewpoint. Just a little article. It says that, as so is often the case, things that scientists are just now proving have been known by the ancients for time immemorial. They didn't need proof. They had an inner knowing of what was right and true. Some Native American tribes teach there is one star in the heavens for each human on Earth, and that is their soul twin. Most ancient cultures around the world have legends about the major star clusters. They teach they are descendants of immigrants from star nations, particularly the Pleiades. Native American legends denote the Pleiades as a sacred place in the heavens. Lakota legend says they originated from the Pleiades, and that after death, the soul returns to its home in the Pleiades. And while they were on Earth, they were given the task by the Pleiades to tend and care for Mother Earth. Native American tribes have done a very good job of that tending. The rest of us have not. So no matter what we talk about, it's we're living, we have to deal with what's going on here with the environment, and indigenous type of peoples have that connection, and all this technology and knowledge that we're getting. I'm not sure where it goes exactly, but they had this knowledge too, but they, at the same time, they made sense of it and didn't get carried away with it, and actually, helped and supported Mother Earth and the environment. So that was kind of interesting that they have this connection, and we're conditioned not to. So thanks, Bob.
Anybody else like to add anything? Sandy, you want to add anything? No, Sandy doesn't want to add anything. I could say one thing about the Pleiadians, that my friend that was working and introduced me to the existence of the Pleiadians, and they did a flyby and caused my car to quit on the highway. I've told that story before. And Semyasi dated Alexander Graham Bell's grandson for about 10 years before she had to leave our solar system and go back onto other projects. And our friend with the CIA said that there's actually two groups of Pleiadians that were here. There was Semyasi's group, who were very advanced. They're like 3,000, technology-wise, if you can even quantify it, was said to have been 3,000 years ahead of us, and they were very benevolent beings. They were actually doing everything in their power to help us. They can't break the laws of the universe. They have to be asked for help. But the Semyasi's group of the Pleiadians are the ones that were the primary cause for the ending of the Cold War. They're the ones that went in and shut down all the atomic missile bases where they would launch atomic missiles. They'd hover over the bases and shut down their electronic circuits so the missiles could not be launched. And they disabled a lot of the military aircraft that were carrying nuclear bombs on board, and they disabled the circuit so they could not launch or drop the bombs on anybody. That was one group of Pleiadians that I really feel an affinity for. And then there was another group of Pleiadians that were probably not as benign. They were actually working with the reptilians and the tall whites, and they were actually developing technologies to control the Earth. And their technology was about 300 years advanced of what we have on Earth, instead of 3,000 years advanced. And they were part of the problem on this planet, along with the reptilians and some of the other people that we have to deal with here. So when you talk about the Pleiadians, they do have more than one group from their star cluster. So I just wanted to point that out. So the next topic I would like to talk about is holograms. My first introduction to holograms was in 1971. I was a young man, and I was in a Navy ROTC scholarship program, and every summer between your college years, you have to go on what they call a summer cruise, and I was taken to a summer cruise out of San Diego, California, and during this cruise, we were invited to, not invited, we were ordered to go down to Point Loma, which was an advanced Navy research center where they were doing advanced research on all sorts of different projects, and it was also a submarine base where they were working with state-of-the-art submarines and all sorts of stuff like that. But we were taken into a room, and we met one of their top physicists who introduced us to lasers. And at the time, they were playing around with different kinds of lasers, and the one that they demonstrated was a red laser, which is formed by shooting high-intensity light through a ruby, and that's why it gets its red color. And one of the interesting things about the laser at that time is they were able to measure distances. Even in 1971, they could use a laser light to measure distances, and they had a digital readout, and they had a projector, and they put the readout of the distance, so they would shine this laser light across a room, and the reading up above on the overhead that we could watch was actually showing the distance from the laser light to the object that they were shining the laser light on. And the guy who was demonstrating how accurate it was, he put his hand on top of the laser machine, and the warmth of his hand warmed the metal of the machinery that was holding the laser light, and it changed the distance from the laser to the object by something like 2 or 3 10,000ths of an inch, and that was measured by the laser light. That's how precise the laser light could measure distances. And also they had a laser weapon that they didn't have it as a weapon, but they took a piece of metal, like they had a steel razor blade, like the old shavers have those one-sided razor blades, and they put that in front of the beam, and this laser beam that they had was maybe a 1/4-inch diameter, and they had the laser light off, and they said, well, this laser will shoot through objects, and they placed this razor blade in front of the laser light and held it in position, and then they turned on the laser for about 1/10 of a second, and it burned a beautiful round hole right through that steel razor blade, showing us how the power of the laser worked. But perhaps one of the most interesting things was when they showed us a hologram. They were working with holographic technologies, and they were on the leading edge of holographic technologies at the time. And remember, this is 1971. This is, like a long time ago, almost 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And what they did is they took a hologram of a naval battleship, and they displayed the hologram by shining a light into a spherical chamber, and what you could see was, and there was, once again, they were using a red laser, you would see this battleship, and what really kind of awed me was the fact that it was like it was chest high where they had this display, and you could stand so that you're looking right down on top of the deck of this battleship, and that's all you could see. And if you stood in front of it, you could see everything in the front. You could see the bridge where the captain, rode and everything, and you could see the anchors hanging off each side of the bow. You could see them. But if you walked to the back of the ship, you couldn't see any of the stuff in the front. You could only see the stuff from the back. And if you got down and looked up underneath the hull of the ship, all you could see is like the screws and the rudder and the bottom of the hull, but you couldn't see anything on top of the deck. It was a true three-dimensional picture. It was like somebody built a model of the ship and displayed it in the case. I mean, it was real 3D dimensionality. It was the real deal, and so that was my introduction to what a hologram looked like. Another interesting experience that I became familiar with was I was discussing holograms with a friend of mine down in the Chicago area, and this was around 1990, 91, somewhere in that area, and he said he and his wife had just been over in Ohio, and they had gone out to a real fancy restaurant, a real expensive steak restaurant, and when they walked in, they found into the restaurant, they found that as they walked in, they had a huge dance floor, a wooden dance floor, in the middle of the restaurant, and all the tables where the patrons would eat were in booths all the way around the outside of where the dance floor was. And as they walked in, they were playing music, something, and they had a bunch of ballroom dancers dancing up a storm with their fancy dresses on, and they were swinging and spinning just like you would expect to see at some dance, a ballroom dance, with the crystal chandeliers and everything. And these people were just dancing up a storm and having a merry old time. The music was going strong, and the lady, the hostess, took them to their seats on the off to the side of the dance floor, and they had to walk around the edge of the dance floor. And as these people were dancing and spinning around, my friend said he had to duck a couple of times because they came so close. He actually had to sidestep to keep from getting hit by them because he didn't want to interrupt their dancing. And when he finally got to his table and sat down, when the waitress came to wait on him, he asked the waitress, "Well, where did you find all these people to come in and dance? I mean, this is really unusual having ballroom dancing in a steak restaurant like this." And the waitress said, "Well, sir, they're not real." And my friend said, "What do you mean they're not real? They're a hologram. They're not real. It's just they look real, and you can't tell them from being real, but they're holograms." And she said, "Next time they get near you, stick your hand out." And he did, and his hand went right through him. So that was my next introduction to holographic technology. So it had come a long way since 1971.